AITA for walking out of my parents' anniversary dinner after they humiliated my husband? I have never had an easy relationship with my parents. People who meet them usually love them. They're charming, social, involved in the community. To outsiders, they seem like wonderful parents. The problem is that who they are in public and who they are at home are two very different things. My parents have 3 children, my older brother, me, and my younger sister. For reasons I've never fully understood, I was always treated differently. My brother could make mistakes, and my parents would laugh them off. My sister could ignore rules. But when it came to me, everything was monitored, criticized, and controlled. I used to complain about it when I was younger. Every time I did, I got the same response. We just expect more from you. We push you because we know your potential. We only want what's best for you. At some point, I stopped arguing because it never changed anything. One constant in our lives was our neighbors. Our families had been friends long before I was born. They attended every major event together. Holidays, birthdays, vacations, barbecues, you name it. They had a son named Matt. Matt was around my age. Because we grew up next door to each other, we spent a lot of time together. As kids, we played outside together. As teenagers, we ended up at the same gatherings. Our parents constantly joked that we'd end up married one day. At first, it was harmless. Then it got annoying. Every family gathering turned into comments. Look at those two. They're perfect together. We'll be in-laws someday. At first, we both laughed it off. But eventually, our parents stopped treating it like a joke. They genuinely wanted us together. The funny thing is that despite how much I hated being pushed, I actually did have a crush on Matt. For years. He was handsome, popular, confident. Everyone seemed to like him. He was also very good at making people feel comfortable, at least on the surface. When we were in college, the pressure from both families intensified. Every conversation somehow circled back to Matt. People acted like our future was already decided. Eventually, Matt asked me out. To be honest, I don't know whether I would have said yes if I hadn't already liked him. But I did. And for a while, things were good. The first year felt normal. We went on dates, watched movies, traveled when we could, spent time together. Everyone around us was thrilled, especially our parents. It felt like they had won some kind of competition. I remember my mother actually saying once, "I knew this would happen eventually." The problems started slowly. So slowly that I didn't notice them at first. Matt had a habit of making little comments. If I got excited about something, he'd roll his eyes. If I achieved something, he'd find a way to downplay it. If I wore something I liked, he'd make a joke about it. Nothing major, just enough to make me feel slightly smaller. For example, I spent weeks planning a surprise birthday party for him. Everyone loved it. People spent the entire night complimenting the effort. As soon as we got home, he said, "You probably enjoyed the attention more than I did." Things like that happened constantly. Whenever I confronted him, he'd act confused. "What are you talking about?" I was joking. "You're reading into things. You know I love you." Then he'd become affectionate. Bring flowers. Plan dates. Tell me how lucky he was to have me. And I'd question myself. The worst part was how differently he behaved around other people. In public, he was the perfect boyfriend. Attentive, loving, supportive. Everyone adored him, especially my parents. Whenever I tried explaining my concerns, people acted like I was imagining things. "Matt is such a good guy. You have such a healthy relationship." I started feeling like I was losing my mind. The version of Matt everyone else saw wasn't the version I saw when we were alone. As the years passed, things got worse. He never outright insulted me. He just made sure I always felt slightly inadequate, slightly insecure, slightly grateful that he was with me. I considered ending things multiple times. I really did. But every time I got close, I'd stop myself. Part of it was because I kept hoping he'd change. Part of it was because I genuinely believed relationships were supposed to be hard. People always talk about how the spark fades, how relationships take work, how nobody is perfect. So I convinced myself this was normal. And then there were my parents. Even then, I knew what would happen if I broke up with him. They would never let it go. They'd pressure me endlessly to reconcile. They adored him. Sometimes I honestly think they liked him more than me. So I stayed. Longer than I should have. Then everything fell apart. One Friday afternoon we had plans together. A few hours before we were supposed to meet, Matt called me. He sounded apologetic. One of his friends was supposedly organizing a surprise birthday celebration for another friend. The plans had apparently come together at the last minute. He asked if we could reschedule. I was disappointed, but not suspicious. People have lives. Things come up. So I agreed. I planned on staying home. Then my best friend called. She had a free evening and wanted to hang out. Since my plans had been canceled, I agreed. We went shopping, grabbed food. At some point, we ended up near a popular restaurant downtown. That's when everything changed. I saw Matt. At first, I wasn't concerned. Then I noticed he wasn't alone. He was standing beside a woman I had never seen before. They were talking, laughing, standing very close together. My friend immediately looked at me. I remember saying, "Maybe it's nothing." I didn't want to jump to conclusions. So I watched. Then the woman started walking toward her car. Matt followed her, and before she got inside, he kissed her. I felt like the ground disappeared beneath me. I don't even remember deciding to move. One second I was standing there. The next I was walking straight toward them. Both of them noticed me. The woman looked confused. Matt looked like he'd seen a ghost. I remember asking him one question. "What the hell is this?" Neither of them answered immediately. The woman looked back and forth between us. Then she asked, "Wait, who is she?" I still remember the panic on Matt's face. That moment told me everything. The woman didn't know about me, just like I didn't know about her. He tried stumbling through an explanation. None of it made sense. The woman kept asking questions. The answers kept changing. Eventually she looked at me and asked how long we'd been together. When I told her the truth, her face went white. Apparently she'd been dating him too. For nearly a year. The poor woman looked horrified. She immediately turned to Matt, started yelling, told him never to contact her again. Then she got into her car and drove away, leaving me alone with him. That's when Matt switched strategies. At first he tried apologizing. Then he tried minimizing. Then he tried blaming. According to him, the reason he'd cheated was because I wasn't attentive enough. Because I didn't prioritize him enough. Because I acted distant. Because I didn't put enough effort into the relationship. Every problem somehow became my fault. I stood there listening to him blame me for his decision to cheat. And after years of manipulation, something finally snapped. I slapped him. Then I turned around and left. That should have been the end. Instead, it became the beginning of a much bigger problem. While I was with my friend trying to process what had happened, Matt got ahead of the story. He called both sets of parents. By the time I got home, the damage was already done. My parents confronted me that same night. Matt had told them that I abruptly dumped him for no reason. He claimed I'd become distant and uncaring. He heavily implied that I'd probably met someone else. Most importantly, he warned them that I might make up lies about him to justify ending the relationship, including accusations of cheating. So when I told my parents the truth, they didn't believe me. Not for 1 second. I told them everything. My father asked if I had proof. I had literally caught him kissing another woman. But because I hadn't recorded it, apparently it didn't count. My own parents trusted him more than they trusted me. The conversation ended with me telling them to leave. Over the following months, things only got worse. My parents constantly pressured me to reconcile with him. Every conversation somehow led back to Matt. Every holiday became an argument. Every visit became exhausting. Eventually, I started distancing myself. The distance helped. Then, about 2 years later, I met Josh. And for the first time in my life, I experienced what a healthy relationship actually felt like. The more serious we became, the more I realized how unhealthy my relationship with Matt had actually been. When Josh proposed, I said yes, without hesitation. My parents' reaction was disappointing, but not surprising. They asked if I was sure, asked if I was moving too fast, asked if I'd really gotten over Matt. My father even told me that Matt always believed I'd eventually come back. I remember hanging up the phone because I genuinely didn't know how to respond. We got married anyway, and life became good. Josh and I built a wonderful life together. The distance between me and my parents actually helped improve our relationship somewhat. We saw each other less often, which meant fewer opportunities for conflict. I honestly thought things were finally settling down. Then my parents announced a huge celebration for their wedding anniversary. Family, friends, neighbors, everyone would be there. Josh and I agreed to attend. I wanted to support them despite our complicated history. When we arrived, everything seemed fine. For about an hour. Then I saw Matt, standing beside my father. Nobody had told me he'd be there. I immediately asked my mother why he was invited. She shrugged and said, "He's practically family. That should have been my cue to leave." Instead, I stayed. Mostly because Josh encouraged me not to let Matt ruin the evening. Then we found our assigned table. Guess who was sitting directly across from us? Matt. That was the moment I realized this had been planned. The entire dinner felt like a setup. My parents spent the evening praising Matt. Meanwhile, Josh was either ignored or subtly insulted. Whenever someone complimented Josh, my parents found a way to redirect attention elsewhere. It was uncomfortable, but Josh handled it with grace. Far more grace than I probably would have. Then came the speeches. My father stood up and began thanking guests. Then he started talking about people who were important to him. Eventually, he reached Matt. He raised his glass and said, "Some people become family even without blood." People looked toward Matt. My father smiled proudly. Then he said, "Life doesn't always work out the way we expect." Several people laughed. Then my father continued, "Sometimes we lose opportunities we never get back." And then he looked directly at me. The entire room went quiet. My mother stood up. She decided to add her own speech. She talked about family, tradition, relationships. Then she looked at Josh and said, "We always imagined a different man sitting beside our daughter." Josh froze. My sister stared at the table, and my parents just kept going. My mother started talking about how some people come into your life only once, how some mistakes can never be corrected, how certain people remain special forever. Every single person in that room knew exactly who she was talking about. My husband was being humiliated in front of everyone for the crime of marrying me instead of being Matt. Then my father laughed and said, "At least Matt still joins us for family events." That was it. That was my breaking point. I stood up, took Josh's hand, and said, "We're leaving." My father told me not to be dramatic. I laughed. Then I asked a question loud enough for the entire room to hear. "Why are you acting like I married the wrong person when Matt cheated on me?" The silence that followed was unbelievable. Some relatives clearly had known. Some friends looked stunned. My father immediately tried to interrupt. I didn't let him. For years I'd stayed quiet. Not anymore. I told everyone exactly what happened. How I caught Matt kissing another woman. How my parents chose his side. How they spent years trying to push me back toward him. By the time I finished, half the room looked horrified. My father accused me of ruining their anniversary. I told him he ruined it himself. Then Josh and I left. Since then, my phone has been exploding. Some relatives support me completely. Others say I should have stayed quiet. My parents claim I publicly embarrassed them. Even my sister says I should have waited until after the event to address it. So now I'm here. AITA for walking out of my parents' anniversary dinner after they publicly humiliated my husband and spent years acting like my cheating ex should have been the man I married? Update. First of all, thank you to everyone who commented on my post. I honestly wasn't expecting it to get much attention, but reading comments from strangers who were able to see the situation more clearly than some of my own family was eye-opening. A lot has happened since then. For those who didn't read my original post, the short version is that my parents publicly humiliated my husband Josh at their anniversary dinner while treating my cheating ex-boyfriend Matt like he was still part of the family. I finally snapped, called them out in front of everyone, and walked out. For weeks afterward, my parents tried to rewrite history. According to them, I wasn't responding to years of disrespect. I was throwing a tantrum. My father told anyone who would listen that I deliberately waited until the anniversary dinner to attack them. My mother cried to relatives and family friends about how I'd ruined the most important celebration of their lives. The funny thing is that not one of them ever apologized for what they actually said. Not once. The conversation was never, "We shouldn't have humiliated Josh." It was always, "You shouldn't have reacted." That told me everything I needed to know. A lot of people expected me to reconcile eventually. I didn't. In fact, the anniversary dinner was the final straw. For years I had tolerated their behavior. For years I had tried to maintain some kind of relationship despite everything. But seeing them publicly humiliate the man I loved changed something. I wasn't angry anymore. I was done. I stopped responding, stopped answering calls, stopped attending family events, and stopped engaging with the endless guilt trips. At first, my parents tried the emotional route. My mother sent messages about family bonds. She sent childhood photos. She reminded me how much she'd sacrificed raising me. My father took a different approach. He sent long messages about forgiveness, family obligations, the importance of moving forward. Not once did he acknowledge what they had actually done. When guilt didn't work, they tried pressure. Relatives started contacting me. Family friends started contacting me. People I hadn't spoken to in years suddenly had opinions about my relationship with my parents. It became obvious that my parents were telling a very different version of events. According to some relatives, I had overreacted to a harmless joke. Others believed I was punishing my parents because they still cared about Matt. A few even suggested Josh had manipulated me into distancing myself from my family. I ignored all of it. And eventually the noise started dying down. Then something interesting happened. One of my friends reached out with information I wasn't expecting. Apparently Matt had recently been dumped. The breakup had happened only about a week before my parents' anniversary dinner. Suddenly his appearance at the anniversary dinner made a lot more sense. So did my parents' behavior. I could practically picture what had happened. Matt gets dumped. He runs to my parents, acts heartbroken, talks about old regrets, hints that he never got over me, makes himself look like some tragic romantic hero. My parents eat it up. Then they decide to play matchmaker again. Not because they care about me, because they care about the fantasy version of me and Matt they created years ago. The idea made me sick, but I didn't think much more about it until Matt contacted me. He created a new account and sent me a message. He said he'd been thinking about the past, regretted how things ended, and hoped we could talk someday. Notice what he didn't mention. Cheating. Not once. He was careful. No admissions. No accountability. Nothing that could be screenshotted. Most people would have blocked him immediately. Instead, I had an idea. So I played along. I kept my responses vague. I told him I was married. I told him I wasn't sure how I felt about certain parts of the past. Nothing specific. Just enough to keep him talking. And wow did he talk. The second he thought there might be an opening, he practically dove through it. He started talking about old memories, old feelings, the relationship we could have had. Then I casually brought up the cheating. I told him that what hurt most was finding out he'd betrayed me. And just like that, he admitted it. Not directly at first, but enough. He apologized, then immediately started justifying it. According to him, the other woman had been just a fling, and he had been lonely and felt neglected. According to him, our relationship wasn't giving him what he needed. Notice a pattern? Nothing was ever his fault. Even his own cheating somehow became someone else's responsibility. Then I mentioned hearing that he'd recently gotten out of another relationship. And wouldn't you know it? The story repeated itself. He said his ex was unreasonable and difficult, that she didn't understand him, pushed him away, and ultimately caused the breakup. Apparently, every woman in his life was responsible for his mistakes. By that point, I had exactly what I wanted. Screenshots. So I sent them. First to his most recent ex. Then to his parents. Then to my own parents. The message I sent my parents was short. Congratulations on choosing a manipulative outsider over your own daughter for all these years. Here's the proof you never wanted to see. Then I attached everything and blocked them. As for Matt, things apparently didn't go well for him. The perfect boyfriend image he'd spent years building started falling apart. I won't pretend I felt bad about it. Actions have consequences. For the first time in his life, he was dealing with some of his. After that, things finally became quiet. And for the first time in years, my life felt peaceful. Then something wonderful happened. A few months later, Josh and I found out I was pregnant. I don't think I can adequately describe how happy we were. We'd been hoping for a child for a while. It was one of the happiest moments of our lives. And, before anyone asks, no, my parents were not included. Neither were my siblings. Neither was anyone who had spent years disrespecting my husband and my marriage. I wasn't interested in pretending everything was fine. The same people who spent years acting like Josh wasn't good enough suddenly wanted access to his child. I wasn't interested. The pressure started almost immediately once word got out. Messages, calls, relatives, flying monkeys, every possible route. My mother wanted to be involved. My father wanted another chance. Everyone had an opinion. Nobody had accountability. I refused. My parents wanted all the privileges of family without any of the responsibility. It doesn't work that way. You don't get to humiliate someone publicly and then demand access to their child. You don't get to spend years undermining a marriage and then expect a front row seat to its happiest moments. Life doesn't work that way. 9 months later, I gave birth to a healthy baby boy. Josh was incredible throughout the entire pregnancy. And somehow he's an even better father than I imagined. The first few weeks were exhausting. Wonderful. Chaotic. Sleep-deprived. Everything people warn you about. And, honestly, I've never been happier. These days my life mostly revolves around feeding schedules, diaper changes. But when I look at my husband holding our son, I know I made the right choices. All of them. Walking out of that anniversary dinner. Cutting contact. Refusing to tolerate disrespect. Protecting my family. Every single one. For years my parents tried to convince me that I owed them loyalty no matter how they treated me. What I finally realized is that loyalty without respect is just control. And I'm done being controlled. So that's where things stand now. My husband is happy. My son is healthy. My home is peaceful. And for the first time in a very long time, so am I.